Thanks for joining us on Shannons Club TV, where we relive classic Australian road and race car memories. Be sure to visit the Shannons Club website, which you can join free and access a huge collection of our previous episodes.
Now, still to come, Shannon's own Tiny Hanson will take us for a drive in a beautifully preserved example of our feature car. And we'll get a market update from the Shannons auctions team. In this episode, we revisit the Holden that put a new emphasis on both economy and performance, the 1980 VC Commodore.
Any student of Australian automotive culture wishing to understand the late 1970s and very early 1980s will learn more from the VC Commodore than any other single car. The VC was launched into a market desperately worried about the cost of petrol. Outwardly, this constituted one of the most minor facelifts in Holden history, but strenuous engineering work had taken place beneath that unchanged bonnet. For the first time since the arrival of the EH in August 1963, the mainstream 3.3 litre 202 six-cylinder engine got a major makeover. In truth, all the work that went into this program did not produce anything like a state-of-the-art six-cylinder engine such as those made by BMW. It really amounted to little more than catch-up. And frankly, it's remarkable that General Motors Holdens could have got away for so long with an engine conceived for the 1960s. Hindsight also tells us that the so-called blue, as opposed to the previous red 6, represented too little, too late. While it doubtless helped the Commodore to maintain its #1 sales position, the writing was on the wall for the narrow-bodied models VB, VC, VH, VK, VL. By the mid-1980s, GMH was facing bankruptcy. Mark, at least the VC Commodore achieved some success on the racetrack.
Yeah, it sure did, and that included a Bathurst 1000 victory, but that was largely as a result of Dick Johnson and his XD Falcon hitting that infamous rock. I mean, the VC Commodore was a successful race car, but it could have been even more successful if it hadn't been caught up in some nasty political battles with the governing body, which I'll get to a bit later on.
In response to the downturn in the popularity of V8s, Holden made this upgraded six-cylinder engine standard in the premium SLE, which had previously come with the 4.2 litre V8. With its automatic transmission, the SLE took 19 seconds for the benchmark standing 400 metres test. So, slow, about 3/4 of a second behind its Fairmont gear rival. And it used more fuel than the bigger engined Ford. Fuel economy was better, but still only average. This is where the unlovable Commodore 4 comes into the frame. Maximum power? Try 58 kilowatts. Without doubt, historians will always be more interested in Peter Brock's first production car than they will be in the Commodore 4. Based on the SLE, it was the absolute highlight of the VC Commodore's 19-month run. And Mark, that first HDT high-performance road car really actually could claim some relationship with the race cars, couldn't it?
Oh, it sure could, but it was a pretty volatile relationship and it led to Brock and Cam's banging heads. The VC Commodore race car was the victim of a power struggle in more ways than one, due to an ugly 2-year political feud with governing body Cams over cylinder heads. At the core of the controversy was Brock's plan to use the big valve Tirana L34 type heads and inlet manifold as fitted to the first of his HDT road cars based on the VC Commodore SLE. After dominating the 1980 touring car title in his small valve VB Commodore, Brock was denied a mid-year switch to the big valve heads in the new VC model, as Cam stipulated that all 500 of his HDT road cars had to be completed first. Brock's victories in the 1980 Sandown 400 and Bathurst 1000 with the small valve VC only strengthened Cam's resolve. With the success of its new touring car rules at stake, the last thing Cams needed was more 1970s Tirana-style domination by Holden as a new decade dawned. John, reading between the lines, it looks like Cams was using a stalling tactic to allow Ford's rising star Dick Johnson, to get up to speed with the new XD Falcon.
Well, perhaps it does when you've got all that inside knowledge. It's very important for them to have what looked like a fair and even battle between the two.
It makes you wonder, look, the racing between Johnson and Brock was so close that year, and Brock obviously had a power deficit, so imagine if he had the big valve heads, he could well have beaten the Falcon, and Cams would have had trouble then because they were trying to establish this new formula with Commodore and Falcon, and they needed the Ford to be strong.
Yes, absolutely, Coach. Yeah. I think you're right, yeah.
The cylinder head dispute dragged on through 1981, with Brock coming within 0.2 of a second of beating arch-rival Johnson in a gripping winner-take-all final round of the Touring Car Championship. Brock then won his 7th straight Sandown 400, but was out of luck at Bathurst with a broken axle. The big valve heads were finally approved for 1982, but a dispute over the road car's luxury equipment and illegal inlet manifolds at the Calder round left race winner Brock with a 3-month suspension. He in turn took legal action against Cams in the Victorian Supreme Court and continued racing under appeal. The conflict was finally settled out of court, with Brock virtually handing the 1982 championship to Dick Johnson on a platter. In return, it would seem, for painless approval by Cams of the new VH SS Commodore. On reflection, the VC Commodore was still a successful car, having claimed numerous major wins, including Bathurst, despite carrying more than its fair share of political ballast from start to finish. Don't forget, you can find your favourite car club or event on the Shannons Club website.
Yeah, g'day there. My name's Tony Hanson from Shannons Auctions in Melbourne, and here we have a 1980 VC HDT Holden Commodore. This is a 3-owner vehicle. It's come over to the Shannons Auctions from South Australia, and it's in very, very original condition. The VC Brock cars were all based on an SLE platform. It was received very well by the public. The new look with the big flares, the SLE interior, electric windows, power steering and air conditioning. This particular car comes with an automatic transmission behind the HDT Enhance 308 engine. When the car hit the market in 1980, the very first public exhibition of the car was at the Race of Champions out at Calder Park, where there was a number of these vehicles racing, no other vehicles, just these vehicles driven by international and national drivers. Driving in this car gives you a lot of pleasure. Driving position is good. Lots of power, that nice V8 rumble out the back. Very, very nice original car. For homologation purposes, HDT produced 500 of these vehicles. This one is number 492, and each vehicle had its own special number on the steering wheel. Down the track with this car, I believe that the values will go up, so if you've got one of these, I'd be hanging on to it.
Shannons National Auctions Manager, Chris Borobon, is here with a market update on the VC Commodore. Welcome, Chris.
Welcome, mate. The VC Commodore, I mean, to me, the two standouts are that beautiful SLE with the shadow tone paint. This is the first time we saw that. And of course, Peter Brock's the first of his HDT Commodores.
Yeah.
Those two cars seem to be the standouts for me in the VC range. Do you see many of those in the Shannons auctions?
Look, we do see a few VCs, HDTs come up. Again, there were 500 of those built, and they were only done in the 3 colours, the red, white and black.
And black. Look, black looks spectacular.
It does, doesn't it? The black's probably the rarest of the 3 combinations, and I think if we go back to the history of those 3 colours, it was due to the sponsor at the time being Marlboro, hence they picked the 3 colours.
Yep.
So yeah, look, I think those cars are sought after. Again, the right history, mileage, low Ks, is all, and originality is what goes in its favour.
Fantastic.
Well, I remember when they first came out, they were the bank robber's choice, before the WRX took over. Everyone was stealing Brocky's Commodores because they were just fantastic getaway cars. They were very quick for their time, weren't they?
Yeah.
215 kilometres an hour.
Yeah.
Manual one would do.
Look, I think this is a good choice for, for muscle car enthusiasts of the 80s. That was a really good choice for them.
And On the shadow tone, I must say at the time I thought it was rather quite, but I think collectors probably really revere that now.
It's classy.
It's quite classy, isn't it?
Yeah.
I mean, especially if you look at the brochure, the original brochure in the black with the silver. To me, that's probably the nicest of the shadow tones they made.
Yes.
And today, I think if you find the right, 5 litre
5
option
litre
in that shadow tone,
SLE manual.
that's got to be probably the bee's knees of it.
So this was, of course, the introduction of the blue engines in 6-cylinder and V8. But I reckon the V8 would be the pick of the crop. I did drive some of the blue 6-cylinder ones, and I really wasn't that impressed.
And
at
the
time.
most infamous of them all was the Commodore 4. Now, do you remember the Commodore 4?
The misfire or starfire?
Oh, that was a misfire, that's right.
That was an extraordinarily slow vehicle. I
What
remember.
it showed was the panic. It showed the panic
did.
that was around.
Yeah.
Take a car that was as substantial as the Commodore and drop an anemic little 4-cylinder
1.9 litre,
engine into it.
Well, I can remember my reaction at the time was brand new, and I drove it around the block and said, "You've got to be joking."
How long did it take you to get round the block? A short block. Yeah.
Which brings us to the point. I imagine these aren't particularly collectible.
I don't think we see too many around, especially in the Ls and SLs.
I don't reckon there was.
I don't think they sold too many.
That's right.
No, look.
And of course we did have Commodore station wagons, which they got flogged in the fleet business by Ford with the big leaf-sprung XEs. But do you ever see Commodore wagons around? And I believe they made a very small number of SLE spec
Oh, did
VC
they?
wagons, which would be a real collectible now. Do you ever see
Certainly
anything
would.
like that?
We have come across a couple of wagons in the last few years, but they're far and few. They're really not too many around. I think a lot of them served as a family wagon in the 80s, and really they were run into the ground.
So what VC Commodore collectability? Do we start with Brocky's machines and work
I think
down?
so, yeah. So I think the HGT Brock, definitely. Again, one of only 500 built, so that's got to be the hero car.
How many do you reckon would survive of those 500? That's a
good question.
Would there be
I
a couple of hundred left still?
I think there'd be more than that.
More?
Yeah, I think there'd be
people
more.
would just cherish them.
I
wouldn't
think so.
they?
I think they got in the right hands initially, and some have still remained with that one owner, original owner. So
And so then after that, maybe a really nice SLE V8. something
SLE
like
shadow
that?
tone car, absolutely, with a 5 litre, and then followed by the 4.2 V8, and then you drop down into VSL models.
Thank you very much
Great, Chris.
indeed,
Thanks,
Chris. And remember, you can get all the latest market news on the Shannons Club website. If you'd like an enduring image of the VC Commodore in competition, visit the Motorsport Archive at autopix.com.au.
It's interesting looking at the VC Commodore now in reflection, because Holden was really sending mixed messages to the market, wasn't it? On the one hand, they were developing these wheezy 6s and 4s. On the other hand, you had Brock with his high-performance V8s.
Hard to believe that the 4-cylinder Commodore, that engine inhabited the same body as the HDT. I mean, the difference was just phenomenal.
Yeah, it was extraordinary.
It's almost a mixed message.
It was a mixed message, and the company was under pressure, so it almost seems confused when you look at it today.
Yes, it does, absolutely.
Tough time.
We hope you've enjoyed reflecting on the VC Commodore, and we look forward to your company next time on Shannons Club TV.